A beautiful morning to you and welcome to another edition of International Desk. My name is Mojisola Shulaja. As we all know, the Russia-Ukraine war is still ongoing and it is actually the 811th day. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians, both Ukrainians and Russians, have died in the process, and unfortunately it is not ending anytime soon. Now, with the re-emergence of President Vladimir Putin, his re-election as the president of Russia at the 5th term, there is growing concern globally if the war would actually come to an end anytime soon. This brings us to the topic, implication of Putin's re-election on Ukraine-Russian conflict. I have as guest today AKINLOYE. He is the analyst on today's edition of International Desk. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Moji. Good to be here again.
And good seeing you too. Now let's begin with the potential consequences of Putin's re-election on Ukraine-Russian war.
All right, so I think the whole world is in the frenzy of low expectation from Vladimir Putin. There's serious low expectation in terms of the fact that leading up to the elections, there were no real contenders, there were no real alternatives for the people of Russia. So if you follow the story, you see Putin putting to death, allegedly putting to death his major opposition leaders, like the one that was poisoned, like the one that was
yes,
like the one that was imprisoned, and so on and so forth. There's tremendous intimidation for anyone who speaks up against Putin, who speaks up to the autocratic nature in which Putin has subjected the citizens of Russia. And so the low expectation is like we are not going to see a change. There will be no paradigm shift. It's going to be as it was in the beginning, so it is and forever shall be. As far as Putin is concerned, don't forget, Putin has been at the corridors of powers since 1999. He has been there even long before that. But at the corridor of power as the Prime Minister of Russia, as the President of Russia, over 20 years. And the days of Putin, if he's not eliminated, is not about to come to an end.
So, yes, he actually said it during his inauguration on Tuesday that it is ruling till death, you know.
Wow.
It's a lifetime process for him.
Wow. I mean, look at a Putin that's survived 34 critical attempts on his life, 34 attempts at assassinating him. Some people call him a cat with 9 lives. He has over 16,000 sanctions as a person and as a nation. The global community has sanctioned Russia with over 16,000
Are the sanctions working at all?
Yes, they are working, but subliminally. If they don't have the powers to crumble him, because what he's bringing to the table is more blatant. The sanctions are basically political and economic sanctions. And don't forget, Russia is a rich country in terms of oil, rich in terms of strategy. And the powers that are against Vladimir Putin, they are not as tactical as Putin is. The likes of Biden, the President of the United States, the likes of Prime Minister of England, they don't have the mental sagacity, the acuity, you know, the intellection that can deal with a brilliant intelligence officer since his youth. He has been a KGB operator since he was a youth. So he thinks like a chess master. He thinks like the master of the game. And so the kind of people trying to attack him with sanctions, trying to attack him with political innuendos, they don't have what it takes to actually cripple him. Sometimes he dances to the tune, edging them all to make them feel that what they are doing against him is actually working. But it's part of the game. You appear weak when you're actually strong. and you appear strong when you're actually weak. So he's the master of the game, and so none of the sanction is truly working.
Now let's talk about the Ukraine-Russia war now. It's started his 5th term as president of Russia on Tuesday with the inauguration. So what do you think will happen now? He's actually gaining more grounds into Ukraine. So what are your expectations? What do you think will happen now that he's beginning his 5th term?
Okay, so there are people who are experts at body language, and they are taking a read. They are reading the body language to mean that Putin's blood-seeking appetite is getting satiated. Is trying not to intensify the war in a way that there will be several millions of casualties. Because if he's able to annex Ukraine and he has killed every Ukrainian, at the end of the day, what is his goal? What does he benefit? What does he profit from it? So what he has been doing is to give an impression that we are still fighting, we still mean this war, we still want to become an empire, we still want to annex and acquire Ukraine, but with low intentionality in terms of killing, in terms of the real conflict. So what has been happening is that he continued to fight on a perception management level that we are still fighting, but really I don't want to kill you. Because the truth is, if Russia wants to critically and sincerely take out Ukraine, they have within their powers the ability to. They have air superiority, they have air parity, they have the technical know-how to eradicate and extinct Ukraine in a matter of weeks. But the idea is, if you kill the entirety of the Ukrainian citizens, who will you rule over? So to your question, one of the things that Vladimir Putin had done successfully is the fact that while the election was going on, the elections held in several provinces in Ukraine. And that is a signal to the West. That is a signal to the United States that I am winning. That's the body language, that I am winning, even though I'm not killing these people as much as I have the capacity to, but I'm winning. Right now, I have established the fact that elections that are happening in Moscow, elections that are happening in St. Petersburg, is actually happening in the territories and the nooks, the crannies, and the crevices of Ukraine. So I'm winning. And that is a big defeat to the West and to the United States.
Huh. Are you sure that will be a defeat?
Yes, that's a big defeat in the sense that they have not come out like they should on diplomatic grounds. They are being very, very ambiguous in their support for the Ukrainian. That can be explained because the Americans are saying stop spending the taxpayers' money to foster and sponsor a war in Ukraine. This war is not directly ours. This war does not affect NATO. So it's baseless. Don't forget, an election is building up in the US, and the body language of Trump, if he becomes the president, is that I am ending the war. I am not spending a dime. I am not sending a dime to Ukraine. And so if the Ukrainian has a chance, it is now and it is in Biden. And so now that he has won the election, I see him being more focused in perpetuating the war. I see him being more present in terms of executing the war. Two things can happen. One, he wins the war, he kills the people. That's an option he's not going to do. The second thing is that there will be a stalemate. There is no winner, there is no loser. They will just continue to fight the war in perpetuity. It's also a strategy that a Putin can deploy. If you study Putin, you understand that he puts every card on the table. There's nothing that doesn't work for him. He's super intelligent. That is the truth. Meaning that he will just keep fighting the war gently, engaging his army, training them on the Ukrainian front, and he's not really killing.
But his military keeps declining.
Yes, and
reducing.
Yes, he has lost over 200,000 soldiers. But what has happened in recent time is that they've stopped critical offensive. So what they are doing now is they are doing occupation. That is, we are on ground. They are not shooting, they are not killing, they are not doing so much as they were doing about a year ago. But they are saying, look, we have these territories. They are claiming the territories and they are expanding the territories without critical violence. And so that is victory on the strategic front for Russia. It's not like you must kill people. Now, what brought about the war in the first place? He's saying, look, you can't join NATO and be my neighbor. If you join NATO and my neighbor, I am going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be insecure. And so he's saying, look, that cannot happen. And so it looks like he's actually protecting his territory. Because obviously, if they join NATO, the US has tremendous influence in Ukraine, and the whole of the West has tremendous influence in Ukraine. That propinquity, that proximity will give them access to Russian technology. If the US and the West has direct access to the reconnaissance that runs Russia, that's the end of Russia.
Before we talk about technology, because I read something yesterday and I was shocked when I got to that in one particular area. Before we go to that, the use of technology and all that, what if they succeeded in arresting or killing the Ukrainian president? Will this end the war?
Okay, so as far as the Ukrainian president is concerned, he's a dead man. At the initial stage of the war, before the war even started, Biden sent a private jet to pick him. He said, look, I don't need a private jet. I need ammunition, I need weaponry, I need stuff. I want to fight. I don't want to escape. And that tells you the commitment that Zelensky has towards this war. And not only Zelensky, every Ukrainian is ready. The majority of Ukrainians are ready to perpetuate this war and to die protecting their sovereignty. So I don't see that. I see several Zelenskys rising up to replace this Zelensky in the event of his death. However, there's a situation where Putin can appoint a puppet to run the administrations of Ukraine, but that will now lead to infighting and serious conflicts. That means that we are now going to have like a rebel insurgency and so on and so forth. But I don't see the end of Zelensky to become or to be the end of the war. I don't see that.
Okay. Now, let's now move to the area of technology. You know, sometime in January, there was a missile that was used, fired into Ukraine, and at the end of the day, after critically examining it, it was discovered that even the parts that were used for the missile, especially excuse me, a chip happens to be produced, manufactured in US. So, and some other areas like that, how did that get, and the missile actually came from North Korea. The fact that North Korea, Russia, Iran, and other countries have been sanctioned, it seems to me that the sanctions are not working. And if a country like North Korea could gain access to a product from the US, that speaks volume.
That's a very, very deep, intelligent question. The world has become a global village, and there's such a thing as publishing technology. When you develop something, you are bound to publish that technology after a period of time. You have to declassify it. And that leads us to war economy and how what affects one affects everybody. It's very important that we understand this as we make progress, that what happens to one of us touches every one of us. Is a ripple effect. And that now takes us to what they call machineries, talking about the people who also have access in all ramifications to certain technologies. Let me give you an example. When the war started in Israel, most of the drones that flew on Israel, they were drones that were not anticipated. They were drones, they were commercial drones in terms of photographic drones, not some war drones, not some drones with capacity to carry payloads of missiles. I'm talking of drones that you can buy for your daughter to fly around the house. they were the technologies deployed and they became very, very effective. And that tells you the whole economy, and that is how it affects us, even up to Nigeria. How do I mean? You just expounded how that a chip manufactured, which is a brainchild of the United States, a technology of the United States, is used against Ukraine, that the United States has been pumping billions of naira in traffic. That tells you war economy. How does it affect us, for example? Look at insecurity. There's nowhere that war is going on that you don't have arms proliferations, where people begins to sell and smuggle arms because there's a war situation. In a war situation, there's lawlessness. In a lawless situation, there's movement of arms. That's why you just discover that it is a period of war in the Middle East that you have a lot of arms entering the northern part of Nigeria. Why? Because it becomes porous. The same thing, this Ukrainian and Russia war has led to serious flying around of both light weapons and missiles. And so if you have ever checked maybe Boko Haram, for example, and you see them carrying some massive ammunition, you begin to wonder, how did it pass through the borders of a country? Once there is a war in any part of the world, it touches the nooks and crannies of the rest of the world. And another part of it is food shortage.
Okay, before we continue, International Desk will continue shortly after this break. Stay with us, we'll be back. Okay, you're still watching International Desk, coming to you live from our studios in Abeokuta, the state capital. We're talking about the impact of Putin's re-election on Ukraine-Russian war. And I still have with me in the studio, AKINLOYE. Yes, you mentioned the effect of, you were trying to talk about the effect of war, economic and food shortages and all that. Before we go there is one other area now that we are gradually coming to Africa. The interest of Russia in Africa now. Is it more of power tussle between US and Russia, or I don't seem to understand that area?
Yes, Africa is the future, whether we like it or yes, Africa is the future. And I won't want to go into that, and that buttresses my point, saying that Putin is a critical thinker, is a big picture thinker, is a fast thinker, in terms of the fact that he was one of the first leaders that knew this about Africa and has been investing in Africa. You remember when he invited all African leaders, about 80% of them showed up on a short notice.
The second summit did not go well.
Yes, and so he's trying to have bases around Africa. As a matter of fact, those who have reconnaissance, surveillance, area surveillance, satellite surveillance, believe that he has his stations already all over Africa, in terms of the fact that if he does that, he's ahead of the US and he's ahead of the West. I mean, that's simple. Why? Because ultimately, if you think of nuclear Armageddon someday, if there's any planet, so if there's any continent that might escape this Armageddon, that might be saved at the end of the day, is Africa. And so any forward-thinking leader in the world must quickly think of what to do, how to have his fingerprints and imprints all around Africa. So it just shows that he's thinking ahead. Because if something happens to the food chain of the world, Africa can rescue the world in few weeks, in few months. This is the only continent that can have things planted and gets to harvest in weeks. On almost every inch of Africa is arable, is plantable. And so that's why any forward-thinking individual must think of Africa, and that's what Putin is doing, trying to make sure that we are like a new bride, trying to make sure that they harness us. Don't forget, we are fighting for emancipation, for liberation, for the psyche that has been destroyed in slavery. We are trying to say, yes, we are relevant. And so anybody that extends a hand of welcome to us, we are going to embrace it, even though it comes with its own consequences as well, because we have been used to hate from the US and from the West. And now anything that we do towards Russia, we cut off those aids. And some of our technologies, even right here in the studio, some of these, our teleprompters and so on and so forth, are from the West and from the US. And so once they cut off a chain of supply, it's going to affect us in terms of we have to remodel all our technologies to what Russia, which we are not used to in Africa. No nation in Africa is used to Russian technologies. We don't even buy hams from them. We don't even buy food from them. At best, we get some wheats and seedlings from Ukraine. And that becomes very, very pathetic, because if Russia continues to progress and then they are able to cripple Ukraine, and the food basket is crippled and destroyed because of its organic nature, there may be total disruption to food supply all over the world, especially Africa. It's going to affect us badly. Don't forget, Ukraine was having a full-blown war, and they were still sending food to us in Nigeria, and we are not at war. And so it becomes critical that we behave like stakeholders, knowing that what touches one part of the world touches the rest of us, like a ripple effect.
Okay, let's wrap up today's edition with, do you expect more aggression from Putin and the rules countries like from, you have UK, Germany and others supporting Ukraine. Now you have Iran, North Korea, China and others supporting Russia. Do you think these are the countries that have loads and loads of missiles, you know, and it is not known, or it is known, but a country like North Korea had the advantage of testing its missile on a war zone in Ukraine. So do you think it will be more of aggression now, or?
Okay, so I think the temperature will go down, and it's very simple. The rule of engagement for war has to do with I confront you with what you confront me with. If Russia wants to deal with Ukraine without the rule of engagement, battle laws, you just throw one technical or one tactical nuke, one tactical nuclear weapon, one cruise missile, one simple 12,000 ton of nuclear weapon, and there's no Ukraine no more. He has the capacity to do that. But there are certain conventions that will not allow him to do that. And so that is why the temperature will go down, in terms of the fact that if you confront Ukraine with AK-47, Ukrainians confront you with AK-47, that is the rule of war. You are not supposed to fly a Super Tucano over Ukraine when they are pointing their guns at you. You have to, there must be parity. Now, I'm saying this to explain how that Russia has exhausted its light weapons. What Russia has that no other person has is nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, intercontinental missiles, and so on and so forth. And now he cannot use it on moral grounds. And so he's likely to maintain a moratorium. He's likely to calm down and just maintain a stalemate, that we are still here, but he's not going to be killing as he could, as he has the capacity to. And so the same thing happens for the rest of the world. They will just observe.
Not with US granting more aid to Ukraine?
Yes, as much as that happens, what will eventually happen is US citizens will say, no, stop sending our money to Ukraine.
Let's just keep our fingers crossed. Well, thank you for coming. We have come to the end of International Desk for this week. Let me once again appreciate you for coming, and thank you for being a part of it. Don't forget to join us same time next week. I am Mojisola Shulaja. Goodbye.